So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Minutes are approved as printed. The agenda is listed here, and so people receive those. Any comments or thoughts on the agenda for the day?
Mr. Chairman, since complaint C, or 14B, which is listed as C on the agenda, involves an accusation of impropriety with regard to the chair, I move that we alter the order of the agenda and move item C to the top of the agenda in order that it may be considered first.
We have a motion to move item C to the top of the agenda. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Motion has been made and seconded to move item C to the top of the agenda. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I hereby recuse myself from the discussion on item C, and I'll turn the gavel over to Carol as vice chair.
Okay, item C has been moved up, and I will read the complaint. Sioux Falls, Chapter 35.
Madam Chair, if I can, the accused did waive confidentiality, so it's all in open session, so please continue. Sorry.
Sioux Falls, Chapter 35, Conflicts of Interest of Officers and Employees and Ethics Board. This section of the City of Sioux Falls, South Dakota Code of Ordinances are the basic rules guiding members of the Board of Ethics. Chairman LaFollette had a bad previous business relationship with complainant and should have recused himself from the process. Therefore, Board of Ethics Chairman Gregory LaFollette has violated the letter and spirit of Sioux Falls Code 35. The complaint is signed by Mr. Bruce Danielson and is dated April 1st, 2014. So, who do we have that wants to speak to this complaint?
Bruce, can you hold on 1 minute? She'll get Jeff.
Hi, Jeff. Let me put you on speaker, okay? You're welcome. Jeff, are you there? Turn up the volume. All right, can we hear you?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay, yep.
Jeff, Dave Pfeifle here. Your fellow board members are present. Mr. Bruce Danielson is at the podium, about ready to present his argument to the board, and then also we have about 8 others in the audience for your information.
All right. Well, thank you. And I apologize for apparently my phone was not up and ringing. So thanks for timing me.
Jeff, we moved item C on the agenda up to the beginning of our business, just so you know.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I'm Bruce Danielson. My family had a business in Alcester, South Dakota called Alcoa Manufacturing. The business was a family-owned manufacturing business, building pressure washers and steam cleaners. From my family's involvement in it, lasted from 1965 when it was formed until 1983 when the assets were sold to another concern, and my parents moved on to other things. And in the early 1980s, and I apologize for not having some of the exact dates here because we had a fire that destroyed a great deal of our business records 4 years ago. And so some of this I'm having to do from memory, but some of it's very clear in my memory. So if you bear with me, I'll go through from there. In approximately 1981 and 1982, we were in the process of planning a succession plan for the family business. And the succession plan involved having certified audits done of the business and the property. And I interviewed several different firms in the area looking for somebody who could do this job for us. And we chose Mr. LaFollette because he professed to have a good understanding of what we were supposed to do for computerization of our business. And if you remember, computers in 1980, 83 were big mainframes, and the PCs hadn't come along yet, so it took a lot of planning to put a $4 or $5 million business into the computer age. And so we were preparing that process, and in the hopes of getting this done properly, one of the things in the certified audit was to make sure that we had all of the, as they say, I's dotted and T's crossed properly, and that we wouldn't have any additional IRS issues, because we were also doing business as an international exporter. A heavy part of our business was involved with a special export program, which required us to do a lot of additional tax forms and requirements to meet the guidelines that were necessary. So after the interviews and all, we hired Mr. LaFollette as part of his firm that was down here on Minnesota Avenue, and if I remember the name right, it was LaFollette Jansa Brand, to come in and do the certified audits for us. The first year, everything seemed to go along well, and the second year came along and where we had to do 2 years of audits in order to do some of the financing things that we were planning to do. And Mr. LaFollette came to my office and he sat down and presented the paperwork that needed to be filled out and made sure that all of this was done. He had even down to the point of having a check drawn, so that because we had to do some things with retained earnings and move things around, that there was a check that needed to be written out. And so he and I went with all his paperwork into my dad's office and proceeded to lay it all out, and my father endorsed the check that was to be endorsed. The check was deposited in the bank, and then immediately then my dad wrote a check back to the company. Well, as it turned out, the check should have been written to my mother, and she should have endorsed the check. This little mistake cost us another IRS audit, and we were going to have a $400,000 tax and penalty assessed to my parents. And you know, in a small business, and we were just coming out of the recession of the late 70s, early 80s, and we were rebuilding the company. All of a sudden, we got hit with a huge penalty that we went back and tried to talk to Mr. LaFollette to see what he could do to help us, and he refused to help us. He refused to take any of the blame for it or help us at all. And in those days, we didn't know anything about errors and omissions insurance that we could have gone after. So we ended up having to hire additional attorneys and tax accountants to help us get out of the problem. And that cost us around $100,000 to just get that taken care of. And Mr. LaFollette refused to have anything to do with us after that, to try and help us get anything taken care of. And we dismissed his services from being involved with us at that point, and never gave it, you know, we had to rebuild. My parents ended up losing. We lost the ability to rebuild the business the way that we had planned. The succession plan went out the hole because we were fighting a huge loss, and the pressure got to be too much, and the family just finally sold the business and got out of it. And that $100,000 that ended up costing to pay for all of the legal fees and accounting fees, et cetera, all came out of my parents' retirement. And, you know, that's even stung to this day. So all we ever wanted was Mr. LaFollette to come up, and he refused to have anything to do with us after that point, and to the point where he ran for office a few years ago, and we were standing next to each other, and he refused to even shake my hand. So I don't know what that was all about at the time, but I just have, I was surprised when I didn't know who was on this board. In fact, I really don't know much about any of you. And I've kind of left it that way because I haven't felt like that's something that I should ever be concerned about. I don't know any of you people. The only person that I knew about was when Mr. LaFollette started to talk, and I go, oh my God, that's Gregory LaFollette. So I'm sorry if I came in naive. I didn't know, that I should have actually asked him to recuse himself at that point. He should have been sharp enough, being a CPA, knowing that conflict of interest situations and past business relationships, whether good or bad, are enough to be a recusal. And he didn't do it. And for that, I was, as I wrapped up the meeting and thought about it more, it upset me more and more that he never recused himself. He never acknowledged that he even knew me. And I mean, it's 32 years ago, but you don't forget those types of things. I was one of his first bigger clients that he had when he had his accounting firm. And that was disturbing to me. So if you have any questions,
Did it occur to you when you realized who it was that was on the speakerphone to say something about that? Or?
No, I didn't realize, that I've never done this type of thing before. And so I'm just an average citizen. I just came in here, placing a different kind of complaint, and then the more I thought about it, and I remembered the process that he went through over the phone that day of the logical, step by step by step that he went through, it was like, I remember that. That's kind of how we got into some of the problems we were in, because it seems so rational and logical, and no, I never gave it a thought that I should have said anything, and I apologize to this board that I, didn't realize that he really should have recused himself. I'm only now just starting to get involved in city politics and understanding some of this stuff. And you guys have a lot of work to do up here trying to straighten out some of the things. I knew in the discussions that were being held that day up here that the different members that were sitting here actually were trying to find a way to solve the problem that I brought up. And I appreciated that a lot. And so I saw that there was some concentration and some thought going into what I had brought the last time. And yet, the thing that bothered me when I got all done was he knew who I was. There's no way he could forget who I was after all those years. I just, to be still a certified public accountant and to have a memory and to have a history, to me that just spoke of a problem. And I thought I'd better address it so that it doesn't happen again. And so that's why I brought this to the attention of this board.
Any other questions for Mr. Danielson?
Well, I don't mean to pursue the wrong avenue here, but you mentioned a succession plan and your mother did not need to sign a check.
There was a whole big plan that was out there for our business. And this was a retained earnings check that needed to be moved somehow. You have to keep a paper trail. And so they were doing a paper trail from the company to my parents and then back, and then we were having to deal with it in a reinvestment back in the business. And it was just a clean way to do it as I remembered it.
Well, again, I don't mean to pursue the wrong avenue here, but is it a fact that there was an error made and someone took responsibility for it? Or is it just something left hanging that never was established? Who's at error?
Well, it was decided that Mr. LaFollette made a mistake. and that was the way we solved it with the IRS. And that when it went back, the attorneys and the accountants that we worked with were able to establish that in the process, and that's how we got out of having to pay the full $400,000. That was supposed to go just to the IRS, and whereas it ended up costing us hiring attorneys and accountants, and essentially we had to pay 25% of what the liability was going to be.
Well, I realize that, I realize it's complicated, and for the third time I'm repeating, this is not what the issue is. But it seems to me if there was an error made, maybe it was an error of omission of information that was given to him, we don't know. So, I mean, we're really, as far as I'm concerned, I'm on cloud nine, I don't know who made an error, and so on. And we could go on, and that's a whole different case.
And I'm not trying that situation. That is.
Neither am I, but you are basing him recusing himself on an error.
Yeah.
And I don't, how am I to know, or we to know the error? Where is the error?
Well, and
there's going to be two sides to this, so we're talking about something that is really not appropriate to what.
Well, and what I'm saying, and the reason I'm bringing this forward, is that Mr. LaFollette should have at least informed this board that we did have a prior business arrangement.
I realize that, and I'm depending on you, but that goes two ways. You should have seen it too, as well as he. I mean, I could go back and forth with that all day.
I'm not on this board. I'm not an ethics expert on this board and on the city's ethics rules. This board is, the city attorney is, and so they should have, Mr. LaFollette should have said at the beginning of this, having seen my name, that I had a business relationship with this individual several years ago and should have sought advice from this board.
I grant you that, but I'm just saying, you understand, at least my position, I can't speak for the entire board, but I really don't know how I can base a judgment if I don't hear the other side, if I don't see in writing what has happened and so on. So I think at least I'm just grasping for straws here on who's at fault and why he should recuse himself. So I guess, as far as I'm concerned, we're after something, we're chasing something that really doesn't matter for this case. Until I get all the facts or know what's.
I'm sure that Mr. LaFollette will probably have something to say in all of this, and I'll be glad to come back up and address anything that he brings up. It's 32 years ago, statute of limitations is long gone. We had a fire, destroyed a lot of the paperwork that was involved with this, and I searched for everything that I could find, and there were the problems. But the fact is, and Mr. LaFollette may even have the business records from that time period to say that we have, what dates all of this took place. I don't know.
I have a question.
Go
Go ahead, Ron.
Okay, this is for the city attorney. I don't know whether we need to do this in executive session or just can do it publicly. I need to know specifically how the rules of recusal are defined in the ordinance. What exactly does it say, and what exactly are the requirements?
Sure. If I may, Carol, I'd be happy to. I mean, the section reference of the ordinance is 35.025, includes also board members in terms of any conflicts of interest. By Chapter 35, a conflict of interest is a financial interest, a pecuniary interest that creates a conflict for a person. In my estimation, this does not state a complaint, even assuming the allegations of Mr. Danielson. It doesn't issue a ethics violation in terms of Chapter 35. As administrative officials, you are doing a quasi-judicial role. I would say that if we want to follow the common law of South Dakota, there are other issues that may generate a need to recuse yourself. Either there's an actual bias, and that is a strong presumption in South Dakota law, that an administrative official is presumed to be objective and capable of judging controversies fairly on the basis of their own circumstances. That strong presumption can be overcome only when the record establishes actual bias or the existence of circumstances that lead to the conclusion that an unacceptable risk of actual bias or prejudgment inhered in the proceeding. The seminal case in South Dakota involves an administrative law judge who was seeking employment with John Morrell and Company, and she actually took and accepted a position with John Morrell 4 days after she rendered a decision where John Morrell was one of the parties. Our state Supreme Court frowned upon that for obvious reasons. I guess you haven't heard all the rest of the story yet, certainly from Greg, but that's generally the other part of the equation, and I think that is a very cautious approach to put you folks in the same camp as state administrative law judge. But to be safe, I would probably put you in that camp because you are performing a quasi-judicial function. Jeff, you agree with me?
Well, no, I appreciate that. Thanks for the background. I do have a couple of questions, but I don't want to interrupt, so.
I'm done.
Okay.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Sure. Just to make sure I heard Mr. Danielson, and this is Jim Janowski. During the hearing, and when Greg was on the phone during that meeting, you recognized his voice. I think you said you're doing this, you didn't think to bring it up at the time. Did I hear that right?
Yes.
All right. And as you thought about it afterwards, you thought to file the complaint. Is it possible that Mr. LaFollette didn't recognize you since he wasn't there?
Well, I can only assume, because I don't know how the whole board works, I can only assume that he would have had the paperwork there, and he could have asked the simple question, is this the Bruce Danielson from Alcester? I mean, there aren't a lot of Bruce Danielsons around, so, who were past clients.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, there are a number of Bruce Danielsons, and it is possible, it sounds like, to a degree, it's possible he didn't know you were the same.
I can't make that judgment. I didn't have his paperwork ahead of time, and I can only assume he had my paperwork ahead of time, so he could have asked.
Fair enough. Let me ask you just a couple other questions. I think as Dave pointed out, there needs to be some evidence of bias. And remembering back to the earlier hearing, I remember Greg asking you to help us understand what the complaint was and giving you opportunity to flesh out the details of your complaint. Do you remember that?
I remember, yeah, some parts of it, yes.
Okay. And so is there anything at all that you believe would point to the fact that Greg didn't listen to what you had to say, or at least, consider the testimony and the evidence that you submitted?
I felt like he was putting me down for even questioning the ethics and the process after I had already admitted that I didn't know the whole process, and that I had published given the press release out at the time, and I understood at that point that I had actually made some mistakes even before I had come here that day. So, and I admitted that right up front when we started this process. And it wouldn't have taken Mr. LaFollette very long to understand, what was happening. So, I didn't feel that Mr. LaFollette actually gave me much of a fair hearing based on his previous prejudice.
All right. And again, I'm just asking, other than your claim that you felt that he was putting you down, and it was something that you did, unfortunately, you made public a private and confidential complaint. He did ask you, though, to help us understand what your issue was. And I mean, again, I'm asking, is there anything at all that you believe he just simply ignored your testimony or made a decision that was completely without consideration of the testimony?
To tell you the truth, right now, I can't answer that.
All right, thank you. I don't have anything further.
Any other questions of Mr. Daniels? Okay, thank you very much.
I'd like to be able to come back up again after Mr. LaFollette's done.
Is there anyone else that wants to speak to this complaint? Mr. LaFollette, do you want to respond?
Good afternoon. Mr. Danielson's estimation of my memory far exceeds actuality. I'm not particularly clear on things that happened 35 years ago. I was practicing public accounting 35 years ago. We had purchased a local office of a regional firm, probably a dozen employees and maybe $1 million worth of billings at the time. I did not at the time that this was filed, or even when I saw the second filing, I did not know the name Bruce Danielson. I recognized, once I saw it, I recognized a Danielson. My client was a corporation, and the stockholder was a man by the name of Glenn Danielson. I'm sorry that I don't know all of his family members. I can tell you that my recollection of our relationship with that corporation is that we did some work for a few years and then we didn't. I don't recall why the relationship ended, business relationship started at all time. I certainly have absolutely no recollection of the kind of case that Mr. Danielson explained. If those facts were even remotely true, there would have been, I assume, a lawsuit or an ethics violation or something. And believe me, I practiced public accounting for 24 years. It's been 15 years since I practiced. There was never an ethics violation. There was never a suit. There was never an out-of-court settlement or anything like that. A couple of times, maybe a penalty, which is a normal operation of a CPA firm, a penalty payment or something, but not of any particular consequence. So I have no memory, no recollection of those facts at all. I can't quite understand the transactions that Mr. Danielson explained, but it doesn't matter. And as far as recognizing his name, I don't recognize him by looking at him, so I would have said if I had been in the room and I had seen him, it would not have changed anything because I didn't recognize him, I didn't recognize his name. Had I recognized his name, it would have made no difference. I don't recall that we had a bad business relationship. Finally, assuming that I somehow remembered that there was a bad business relationship, I still would not have impacted my handling of that particular case. It was 35 years ago. And although I wish I had that kind of memory, I simply don't. So that's all I have to say. I'll answer any questions.
So you're saying that you don't associate Mr. Danielson with bad feelings or that you have anything?
Certainly not. Had I known who he was, and if he'd come up and said, hey, his father, my father used to run Alcoa, I'd have said, oh, hi, because I don't recall having any bad business relationship. No.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions? Mr. LaFollette?
How many clients have you had, Greg, over the years as a CPA?
I'm trying to figure out whether I should say thousands or tens of thousands, but certainly many, many, many thousands. And Alcoa was a nice little business, but was certainly not material to our practice then or now.
All right, thank you. Did you want to respond, Mr. Danielson?
This is probably going to taint everything I do with the ethics board from now on, just because I brought this forward, and I actually have faith in the ethics board trying to do the right thing. I believe that Mr. LaFollette must have some memory issues, and I'm sorry for that. It was a rather heated exchange, and he would have to remember those exchanges when we ran into that problem all those years ago. I would be shocked that he wouldn't.
Between you and?
Yes, I was deeply involved in all of that. I was the one that hired him. My father was actually traveling a great deal at that time. Greg sat in my office during those weekly audits. We shut down the factory. He was actually in my office for week on end, for the whole week while we ran those audits and did all of the work. I found every piece of paper he ever needed to do the audits. He sat in my office. It would be a tough time for him to forget who I was. And that's really disturbing that if the chairman of the ethics board has that kind of a memory problem, then we've got a real problem with the whole ethics system of this city. And I've been working really hard trying to find ways to make this process work this year in politics. And this is not a political issue here. I've got a problem with the chairman of the ethics board, and I'm shocked that he does not remember. I mean, yes, I've changed in 32 years, as we all have. But I remember him quite vividly sitting in my office doing this work with me, and the long hours that we put in, and the hours I spent in his office. He didn't have a big practice in those days. He had a nice practice, and we were hoping to be in a long-term relationship, business-wise. And it was disturbing, to see how he liked to downplay us when I know at the time we were an important part of his business, and we were going to be a much more important part of the business. So, I'm sorry I don't have all the paperwork. I wish I did. We had a fire 4 years ago. It destroyed the rest of my family's retirement. And we lost a lot of paperwork in there. My parents kept everything that had to do with all of this and all the other business they had. My dad died 2 years ago, so I have no way to go back and ask him any more questions. But I'm the one that worked hand in hand with Mr. LaFollette and did everything with him. And I'm shocked that he doesn't have any kind of a memory, even if he had thousands of employees. The discussions we tried to have to try and figure out how to handle that tax liability and the way he abandoned us was disgraceful. And I'm not going to ever forget that.
Okay, so clearly you have bad feelings. I think that's all that we need to hear. I mean, unless you have something.
No, that's it.
Mr. Danielson, I want to make this a personal comment, if I may. I hear the level of your concern and your distress over this. I believe that that's a very honest concern, very honest distress on your part. If I may speak a personal word, I was a pastor for 20 years. I pastored 4 churches. And those churches, over the 20 years that I was a pastor, probably had a total of maybe 2,500 members. my head works, once I left the church, if I ran into one of those people on the street, I wouldn't remember their name. I have an auto delete
I can relate.
in my head, and so it doesn't sound odd to me at all that he doesn't remember. That's just the way different people's heads work. You know, it seems to me that the only basis on which we can possibly rule on this complaint is our understanding of the ordinance and whether there is an actual violation of the ordinance or of the presumptions of South Dakota law. I hear how personal this is for you, and I'm really very sorry about that. I kind of think if you had brought it up at the original meeting, that Chairman LaFollette would have responded appropriately to that. But I can't hold him responsible for not remembering.
Well, and I can appreciate that to some extent because I've had a few thousand employees through the years in the different companies that I've been involved in, and so, you know, I don't remember every one of them.
You know, there are probably some of them who don't like you very much and remember
I'm sure
you
there are.
very well indeed.
And if I was on an ethics board and they came in and made some statement and I didn't remember them, okay. But most of these people went about their daily work and there was never any problems and you just went on with life because, you know, they did their job, I did my job, I paid them and everything was fine. And, you know, years go by and somebody walks up to you and says, you know, they remembered me from somewhere and I go, oh, where was that? And oh, okay, you know, I'm sorry, I don't remember you, and that's another story. But there are people that actually we had disputes with or problems with, and those people you seem to remember, and from both sides. And so I'm just saying that this was one of Mr. LaFollette's first snafus that in his new practice, and we tried to work with him to get him to help us, and there was a refusal, and then, you know, so let it all go by and it was gone, and, you know, life moved on, and we didn't know about things like errors and omissions insurance. I mean, that we weren't in that business. We didn't understand that we could have actually asked his errors and omissions insurance to take care of it. You know, it wasn't until after we were all done with everything and somebody said it one day and we had no clue.
I understand.
So, you know, it's clear that you have a very strong emotional reaction, and I understand that too. It's equally clear that Mr. LaFollette doesn't have the same emotional reaction, and, you know, for me, I don't see how he could be biased against you.
Well, there are things that can happen. I'm sorry. Human nature says, you know, that you compartmentalize some things and you kind of set them aside. And this was one of those things that probably got compartmentalized in him, like it did with, you know, with me, until I sat here and realized that he was here. And then it was like, you know, I'm sorry. It was, you know, I never even gave it a thought that I should have stopped the proceeding that day. I just never even gave it a thought.
And we understand that. And it did come flooding back to you. It did not come flooding back to him, from what I can tell. And, you know, we're not about, you know, saying we're not about saying that people are being honest or dishonest when there, you know, is something like this that happens. We believe that you're being honest. I believe that Mr. LaFollette is being honest. All of us have had that same experience, as you just admitted you have too. I've been a professional counselor for 30 years, and I still have people that come up and talk to me, and it's really dicey when you were their professional counselor, but you know, there's been so many people that it's hard. I mean, we don't remember everything.
But in an ethics board, and that's why I'm bringing this up, and there's going to be more of these types of issues coming up. I mean, and I'm trying to go through the ethics rules, the code, and I'm trying to understand, for somebody like me to come before a body like this and make any kind of a request, any kind of a charge, you know, it's not an easy thing for us to do, because this is not what we do for a living. And we just want to be able to go to a rule book that actually spells out what it means to be part of this group. We want to be able to come here and say, I have a question, and get an answer that actually fits. But every time we bring up a question, be it here or one of the other city offices, there's always some rule that's buried and it's written this way or it's interpreted this way. And so we come to the ethics board with the understanding that you're fair-minded, you're fair judgment, and we want to be able to, you know, not hurt anybody in this process, but we want to make it work for us. You know, the job of the city attorney is actually to protect the charter of the city of Sioux Falls. It isn't to protect the mayor, it isn't to protect you board members, it isn't, his job isn't to protect anything other than the charter, and to make sure the charter doesn't get hurt by the people that are sitting in these offices. And just as the Attorney General of South Dakota, his job is to maintain the integrity of the state constitution. He isn't the governor's attorney, he isn't the Secretary of State's attorney. He is the attorney for the Constitution and whatever it takes to protect the laws in the state of South Dakota. Attorney General of the United States is the same as the attorney in charge of the Constitution. And that's what we expect, you know, to happen. So we come to this board and we don't want to have to find some secret rule book that's buried in a basement somewhere that keeps us from having to air our grievances properly. And it's really becoming disconcerting to a lot of people in town. And so all we're doing is I'm bringing this forward. I had a bad business relationship with an individual. I wish to have this person recuse himself every time I show up in this chamber, because I don't trust that he will be fair and honest, especially after what I've just been through today. And I'm expressing my concern about it. Because I'm sorry he doesn't have a memory of sitting in my office and me sitting in his office for days on end. That's something that's kind of hard to forget. And I mean, 32 years of sitting in an office, hashing out all kinds of detail, going out and counting machine screws, and teaching him how to do physical inventories in our facility. And him having to be there as we are counting to make sure that things are done properly. I was with him the entire time he was in that building. And I spent hours with him at his office here in Sioux Falls. And I'm sorry he's forgotten that we had this tax issue that he was at fault for. I'm trying not to make that the main situation here, but there are things that even subliminally, and you as a counselor and you as a pastor, there are things that happen in a person's psyche subliminally. And you may not remember why that struck a bell, but eventually it comes to you why that seems familiar. And that could have happened that day up there. I've worked with a lot of people over the years. I do business consulting, and we ask a lot of questions and go through a lot of things when we sit down with the client and try and get it taken care of. And And I feel like I'm a counselor many times, you know, and sometimes you almost feel like a pastor, you know, because you're trying to get people to work together and to make things happen. And so I understand where you're coming from on that.
Well, I would hate to think that you might be considering us unethical because we did not agree that your complaint was.
No, I'm sorry, I interrupted you, but no, I'm not calling this board unethical. No, I'm not. There's no intimation of that. I have a concern about somebody's, one individual not recusing himself from a past business relationship. And that's all it is. I don't know any of you people. You know, Dave I've met at the gym and, you know, different things, but the rest of the members of this board, I've never met any of you people before. And so I now know more about you two than I knew before. I have nothing about Mr. Swanhorse, or the gentleman on the phone. You people, I saw the three of you sitting here last time. And I saw your concern in trying to do the right thing. And I appreciated that a lot. And in the concern I brought up at that time, but I also realized at that time I had done wrong because I had been informed that I had done it wrong. And so I knew the answer you were going to give because that was the only right answer that could have been given at that time. So I didn't have a problem at that point. It was only after I realized this other situation should have been handled a lot differently. And I'm sorry I've taken a lot of your time today on this, but I do have a strong concern, especially now going forward with any of the concerns that I'm going to be bringing at this meeting and some future meetings, if that works out, that Mr. LaFollette recuse himself when I'm appearing before the board, or however you're going to deal with it. So I thank you very much for your time. Did you have any other questions? I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Any discussion?
I'm sorry, I have a couple follow-up comments.
Okay.
We've now spent the last 45 minutes here with what I feel is my character being assailed, and I take high offense. I would ask the members of the board to consider background and reputation. I've practiced public accounting for 25 years. I'm now an executive of the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants. I chaired the ethics committee for the State Society of CPAs for 17 years. To be accused publicly of an ethics violation is incredibly hurtful. To listen to a litany of malpractice that is absolutely untrue, with absolutely no proof. And I have to sit and listen to someone, whoever they happen to be, accuse me of those kinds of malpractice. And I don't know what the rules are for Steiner and libel, and I'm not frankly interested. This comes very close. So I would ask the members of the board to consider background, reputation, and intent when you look at a finding in this complaint.
Discussion.
Well, Carol, this is Jeff, if I may start.
Please.
I echo the comments made by the board. I certainly understand the concerns. They don't seem fabricated. And I see both sides. And I also hear Greg and the comments he just made. evidence of bias, actual bias in that hearing. I think Dave may also mention financial gain, but I don't see that as really implicated here. So when you think about the testimony given, what I recollect Greg asking, I think we all listened to the evidence. I think we looked at it fairly. I just didn't see anything, and Mr. Danielson, in response to the questions, couldn't point to any specific facts that would indicate some evidence of bias. And I think applying that standard is where we should be and how we should end up looking at this matter and using that as a springboard to resolve, at least for us to reach our conclusion. And it seems to me that without evidence of any kind of impropriety or bias in decision-making by Greg, I can't see that there's factual basis to support the claims.
I agree. And looking through the minutes of the last meeting, I can't find anything that looks even remotely prejudicial. Move that we dismiss the complaint.
Is there a second?
I second.
I second.
All those in favor of dismissing the complaint, please respond by saying aye.
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 Motion passes.
We have a motion to report the findings based on your discussion and have allow Carol to sign on behalf of the vice chair.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, I'll turn the meeting back over to our chair.
Thank you. We'll move on to item A, the complaint 14-B filed March 31st, 2014. Let the record show, I understand that the complainant has previously filed a complaint against me personally and asked me to recuse myself, and so I will formally refuse that request before we begin this particular case.
Mr. Chairman, since the mayor has been specifically named on complaints 14B and 14C, I will be recusing myself and will participate as needed on behalf of city government and the mayor in particular. So I will leave my chair and as advisor to the board.
Thank you, David. So complaint 14B, filed by Bruce Danielson, Chairman of the Citizens for Integrity, March 28, 2014, cites ethics ordinance violation of section 38.021 of Sioux Falls Code, expenditure of public funds to influence election outcome prohibited. The use of Sioux Falls Carnegie Townhall, City Bank, and the City of Sioux Falls Web Services to campaign to broadcast the 2014 State of the City address, Wednesday, March 26th. Therefore, Mayor Mike Huether has violated Sioux Falls Code section 38.02. Mr. Danielson, would you care to address the board?
To start with, I would like to make the formal request that the chairman recuse himself based on the complaint that was just turned down, and I just wanted to put on the record. And on the trying to go through this issue after the time I was here last month, and I was trying to make sense out of how in Sioux Falls we can consider the events of the State of the City address to not be a political event baffle me. We have this the mayor and the city is specifically prohibited from using Carnegie or any other city resources to give a campaign event on the city's time and dime. Now, had he had an event at Carnegie and paid the rent on the hall or done something, that's one issue. What we ran into on the night of the day of the State of the City address was the mayor using the event to give his campaign speech. I've sat through his campaign speech enough to know that speech was just purely his campaign speech. I could have brought a whole series of recordings, and if I need to, I will bring them and have you all sit through all of these different recordings of all these different campaign events. Had we learned something, had we gone through and actually not had the city creating the PowerPoint demonstrations, the mayor having a sign made that he could wave around based on information that wasn't even factual. It was a popularity poll done somewhere, and was never given any credence to any of this. But the city went and spent, I don't know, $25, $30 or something to have that sign made, and so he could wave it around and get a publicity picture to go in the Argus Theater or on the TV cameras. I don't know, but had he given us anything close to what Mayor Munson used to give as a State of the City address, it would have been acceptable. But all he did was give us the campaign speech. And that was the basis for this complaint. Another side of the complaint was it was stated that he was to give the State of the City address at a certain time period after the financial statements were issued in March. And I have, what I've done is I've gone out to Siri, as far back as Siri could go. That's the city's broadcast system and record-keeping system. And I was able to put together the dates of the comprehensive annual financial report for each one of the years that were being used as examples. And so if you notice there, on each of the dates of when they were issued by the city. And in fact, to make it a little bit easier to follow along with what I'm going to do, I'm going to hand you these two sheets that are actually spreadsheets that are attached on the back of that format. And so during the process that we went through last time, it was stated that that the mayor had to give his State of the City within 2 weeks of the issuance of the financial statement. If you go down through this process, you'll see where the issuance of the financial report, I'm looking at the big sheet on the spreadsheet, the issuance of the financial report is right in 2007. Mayor Munson did it on the same day. They issued them together. Then we go down into, you'll see this is off series, so you'll see some special council meetings. And then you give the budget address in July, and then we come back in issuance of financial report in 2008 was on March 20th. The special, then we have Mayor Munson giving his presentation on the 27th. Well, we go down through here, and you'll even see in 2009, and let's see, I'm sorry, we had elections involved during this whole time period, and there was trying to say that there was some kind of correlation between, Mayor Munson did this versus Mayor Huether. So I went through and analyzed the time sequence. And the issuance of the financial statement, I can't find it in the charter when that's required. I would assume it must have been by the end of March, because that would be the first quarter. And it was always done in March. Then we get down to Mayor Huether when he's going into giving his first State of the City address. It actually shows he did it in 2011. He did it on the 13th of April. He gave, then further down, it goes into all of these dates far after. We even have it in May 3rd of 2012. So his answer to why he had to give his campaign speech as the State of the City address was in another way to use the city's dime and time in order to run for re-election. And we can go down through this and in more detail if you'd like, but you can see it right on here that he was moving things around so that he could campaign using Carnegie Hall. And that is in direct violation of what the charter has stated. And there was some comments here the last time, and I don't see those PowerPoint examples here showing that the mayor's office had all these PowerPoints done. And then they said, well, Mayor Munson had a whole bunch of PowerPoints. He had a bunch of slides he put up. I mean, they weren't PowerPoints, anything like what the mayor had. And then this is something I never saw in any of Mayor Munson's or in any of Mayor Huether's prior State of the City addresses. And that's campaigning. I mean, he used these examples in his speeches, and he had somebody in City Hall be able to make that for him so that he could do it and show it on Carnegie, at Carnegie on the TV, in front of a room full of city employees who probably had other things they probably should have been doing than sitting and listening to a campaign speech again. So I'll take any questions you have.
Any members of the board have any questions?
Well, I think we established that the charter does not give a specific date. It does require the mayor to do a State of the City address, but it doesn't give any date. I think that your concerns need to be addressed to the committee that deals with changes in the charter.
Well, that's going to be addressed. I mean, we're going to be making some changes, but
If they believe that a date should be set for when the mayor should give the State of the City address, they need to change the charter. That isn't within our purview. And
I understand.
I understand that you didn't like the State of the City address and that you didn't feel it was genuine State of the City address. There would be many people that would agree with you and many more that would disagree with you. I don't see the ethical problem personally. I just don't.
Well, if you don't mind my saying, ethics has a lot to do with appearance also. And if for 3 prior years, he found time to do it mid-April to May, and the financial reports are always done on a certain schedule, and they've been on this same routine up until this year. And it was election time, and we need some good press. And that's the appearance. A lot of politics and a lot of what happens is appearance. And this was once again shoving rules around to give an appearance of something. And what we're trying to do is establish through this process, and we'll be working with trying to get some things done with the charter. And if we have to do more petition drives to drive people crazy with petitions, to get some things done, then we're gonna have to try and figure out ways to get rid of some of these ambiguities and abuses that happen to the system. And this one is a basic abuse. Both of these A and B that are being brought up right now are abuses to the system by, and it could be Mayor Huether today, it could be, Mayor Smith tomorrow, we don't know. And unless we establish some kind of guidelines and rules and try to hold people accountable to these types of decisions, the appearance of impropriety is often as bad as the actual impropriety. So that's what I'm asking, and I just wanted to open this back up to consideration. This time I tried to follow all the rules that were laid out ahead of time. I made mistakes last time, and I don't feel that it actually got a fair, honest discussion last time because I had made that mistake last time, and this time I wanted to make sure that the whole process was openly discussed.
Mr. Danielson, as I think I said in the last meeting, I really do appreciate your concern, and I can agree that it doesn't look great. There is nothing in the rule. If we had a basis of any kind in the rules to rule in your favor last time, we would have done so, regardless of the mistakes you made in making the application. We didn't, and we still don't. It's just not there. You're defining the mayor's speech as a campaign. That's not defined anywhere in law or fact. The mayor is required to give a State of the City report, and that's what it was billed as. That's what he said he was doing. Attributing motive to him is something that we cannot do. I'm sorry. There's not a basis in the rules as they exist for us to find your complaint valid. If you get the rules changed, we'll enforce the rules. That's what we're here for. We're volunteer citizens who are here to enforce the rules. If there's a rule for us to enforce, we'll enforce it. There isn't. I don't know how much more direct to be. I don't have a basis to find in the rules as they exist to find in your favor.
Well, in actuality, what you're saying in these rulings this afternoon is you're accentuating why we need to correct the rule book, and if you're not able to find a problem with this when most of the citizens of Sioux Falls see a problem with it, then we need to find a way to fix the system.
Most of the citizens of Sioux Falls have a problem with it. They know how to make a change.
Well, and that's essentially what we're trying to establish as part of this and appreciate your time and being able to help us define, that there's an additional set of rules out there that we need to either add or find. And that's what we're going to have to be trying to do then. So I appreciate your time, and it would have been much easier to deal with this if the mayor would have been here. And I know he's busy, but this is an important issue. And it isn't just for this mayor, it's for all of the mayors and city council people to come that these issues may spring upon us. And it's the responsibility of that office holder to be here when a citizen has this type of complaint to bring. And I don't know how to compel the mayor to be here to answer these questions.
David Pfeifle, city attorney. I would first request that the board take judicial notice of their prior findings and conclusions from the prior complaint. And certainly, I think your questions are already echoing those. I would like to present some testimony from Heather Hitterdahl, who's the communications specialist for the city. And she will go through and compare the 2013 State of the City address and also compare it to the 2014 State of the City address. And then I would like to reserve a few minutes to discuss at least some of the many allegations that have been repeated by Mr. Mendelson. So thank you. I'd like to introduce Heather Hitterdahl.
Good afternoon. My name is Heather Hitterdahl. I'm a communication specialist for the city of Sioux Falls, and I do work in the mayor's office.
Sorry, Heather, before. We have the PowerPoints for 2013 and 14, and Carrie has them in her hands. We'll pass them out to the board and also to anyone in the audience, so everyone will have and look at the same thing. I apologize, Heather, didn't mean to interrupt.
Between the finance department and myself, we do come up with a lot of the content for the State of the City address, and then propose that to the mayor for his review. So I would like to go through the slides for 2014 and compare it to 2013. And I'm doing that because that is how we come up with the content oftentimes for this speech in particular. We start with last year's speech and modify it to update it for the current year. Slide 1, of course, is very similar to slide 1 from 2013. It even has a similar design. I didn't realize that till afterwards, but it does even look similar to the last year's presentation. Slide 2 is very similar to slide 2 from 2013. This is just the slide that sets the tone for the presentation, and that line was part of the letter that the mayor sent to the council on March 7th to announce that he was going to give the State of the City address. Slide 3 is very similar to slide 4 from 2013. You'll notice that in a lot of these slides, we weren't terribly creative even in changing the headlines. A lot of the headlines are similar as well from 2013. Slide 4 is updated numbers from slide 6 from last year. In 2013, a lot of the graphs went from 2003 to 2012, and of course in 2014, now the years go from 2004 to 2013, but many of these graphs are simply updated numbers from the year before. And finance does provide much of the information for these graphs. Slide 5 is updated numbers from slide 7 in 2013. Slide 6 is updated numbers from slide 8 in 2013. Slide 7 is updated numbers from slide 9 in 2013. Slide 8 is updated numbers from slide 10 on 2013. Slide 9 is updated numbers from slide 11 in 2013. And slide 10 is updated numbers from slide 13 in 2013. Slide 11, this is an unusual one. It is in response to slide 45 in 2013. In 2013, the first pass of the neighborhood branch pickup had just been completed after the ice storm. The State of the City address took place about 2 weeks after the ice storm last year, and this slide is in response to the mention of that last year. These numbers have been presented many times in previous presentations. Slide 12 was not in the presentation from 2013, but it was presented by the finance department to the council on March 11th, when Tracy Trebek gave his year-end financial report. And a slide similar to this was in the 2011 State of the City address, although not in the 2013 address. Slide 13 was not in the 2013 State of the City address, but it was presented orally to the council. Tracy Trebek presented to the fiscal committee meeting on November 5th of last year, and a lot of this information was presented at that time. It was just placed for this presentation. Slide 14 was not in the 2013 State of the City address, but it was in the 2011 State of the City address. We did address debt, particularly in this presentation, because it was a topic in the media at the time the speech was given. Slide 15 is updated numbers from slide 16 in the 2013 State of the City address. HR provides this information each year. Slide 16 is very similar to slide 15 from 2013, talking about the pension reform in 2013. Slide 17 is very similar to slide 17 from 2013, talking about the booming economy. Slide 18 is very similar to slide 19 from 2013. Community development and planning and building services provide much of this information each year. And the final bullet about the top building projects for 2014 is public record. It's just based on the top projects of building permit valuation. Slide 19 is updated numbers from slide 21 in 2013. Slide 20 is updated numbers from slide 20 last year. Slide 21 is updated and very similar to slide 22 from last year. Community development in downtown Sioux Falls provide a lot of that information. Slide 22 is again similar to slide 24 in 2013. Slide 23 is similar to slide 25 in 2013. Slide 24 is a slide I would consider new to this presentation. It is in the spirit of the other slides about street construction that are in every State of the City address, but these two projects were completed in 2013, so those are new projects. Slide 25 is in response to slide 36 from the presentation in 2013. It talked about the citizen survey that was completed in 2013 and how citizens believe in making progress in improving the parks. The Parks and Recreation Department provided the information for that slide. Slide 26 is very similar to slides 27, 28, and 29. And so is slide 27. Those are street projects. The first slide is city-funded projects, and the second slide is city and Department of Transportation funded projects. Now to slide 28, which is very similar to slide 30 from 2013. Slide 29 is in response to slide 37 from 2013. It talked about the need to do more in the area of affordable housing. And so this year we did respond to that, which is what we had done in the past year. Community development provided that information. Slide 30 is very similar to slide 31, talking about confidence. A lot of the sections of information in the presentation are similar to last year. Slide 31 is in response to slide 37 from 2013. We talked about the need to do more regarding traffic flow, and Public Works did provide this information, and a website about the East 26th Street project has been live since January. Slide 32 is also in response to slides 36 and 37 from last year's presentation. Slide 37 last year talked about the increasing public safety. Slide 36 talked about code enforcement, and public transportation was mentioned by the mayor as an area of challenge for the city moving forward into the future. Slide 33 is updated information from slide 40. We each year have a list of the street construction projects for the coming year. The Public Works Engineering Division provides that information, and we did have a youth conference with this information back in November. The rail yard redevelopment slide 34, is updated information from slide 41 last year, and Public Works provides this information. Slide 35 is very similar to slide 18 from last year. It was a recent headline talking about the economy in Sioux Falls. Slide 36 is again a recent headline similar to slide 18 last year. Last year's presentation also talked about citizen survey results and how people feel about living in Sioux Falls, so I consider it similar to that information last year. Slide 37 is similar to slide 46 from last year. It's just recapping the tone on the address. And slide 38 is the same slide we end up with every year. It's updated dates on when the broadcast will be reoccurring on CityLink. Do you have any questions for me based on the content of the State of the City address?
Heather, can you tell me when, approximately, when the last piece of factual information, that's your metric information, was, you got the last number that went into this thing?
Probably the day of the speech. We're always making changes the day, even the day of the speech. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you, and I appreciate Heather's assistance in pointing out to you how almost identical 2013 to 2014 is for the State of the City address. The flippant part of me would say, I hate to let facts get in the way of a good argument, but I think these facts are very conclusive. It is a very similar speech. You heard last time from Brett Matheson that certainly the State of the City addresses have been very typical for many years now. You can see graphically and content-wise, 2013 and 2014 are almost identical. The data just changes from year to year. It's a very similar speech. You look up what a State of the Union address is on Wikipedia, and it says very clearly, a State of the Union address is to be upbeat and inspirational, to motivate the troops, shall we say, into action for the next year. That's exactly what this speech has been every year that we're aware of in the city of Sioux Falls. There's a good reason there were several city employees there that day. They were being congratulated for the great job they have been doing, and also being motivated by the mayor, who's the chief executive officer of our city, to go out and keep up the good work, and here are some additional projects that we want to get done. The mayor isn't here because you folks have already found this same set of facts to be a frivolous complaint without any basis in law or fact. The mayor has so many things on his schedule on a daily basis, he cannot meet every request for his appearance. Why would he spend 2 hours here on a complaint that you folks have already found is frivolous? In the end, I would urge you to find this frivolous yet again. I don't think there's anything here that's changed. All we've heard is some more argument that has been blasted out of the water by the facts. And in terms of what's motivating this, you need to keep a couple things in mind. Mr. Danielson has come to the City Council and stated at general public input that the purpose in his life now is to critique city government. And he thanked the City Council for giving him a purpose in life. These complaints will not cease. After we found the first one frivolous and without any basis in law and fact, what happens? We get 3 more. Then we listen, unfortunately Greg had to listen to over almost an hour of character assassination from someone who says, well, I can't produce any documents because the dog ate my homework. At some point, I would urge you to not only dismiss this, but to dismiss it with prejudice, because these complaints will keep coming. It's the same set of facts. It's the same incident, the state of the city address. We've already gone through this. You've given this a fair hearing. You've heard more facts today, at least from our side, in terms of, here's the content-based issue. There's nothing there. Your bylaws also state that you can make a finding that a complaint is brought for harassment purposes. I would urge you to make that finding as well today. Or this type of character assassination, these types of frivolous complaints will simply continue. People have free speech, yes they do, but at some point, you have a lot of innocent people that are affected by that exercise of free speech. And we have boards such as yourselves that are all volunteer citizens trying to do a great job for the city of Sioux Falls, being impacted, being impugned in your character, simply out of, shall we say, spite for city government. Mr. Danielson has the only petition outstanding at the moment. He has a ballot question committee, Citizens for Integrity. I submit to you, there's going to be a lot of these types of activities by Mr. Danielson to generate publicity for his cause, to try and generate signatures on that petition. That's all this is about. Again, I urge you to find yet again the frivolous is brought for harassment purposes. Thank you.
Members of the board have comments or questions? Mr. Davis, I will give you 3 more minutes.
All right, because I found it very interesting, and I understand through all the years I've been involved in political activity of different sorts, some of what was just said was to impugn my integrity, and I'm sorry the dog ate my homework. My question before this body, if the mayor couldn't be here this time, why wasn't he here last time? That's just plain and simple. If I brought something up last time and it was all done through surrogates, why is the city attorney representing the mayor? He's off the dais, he's now back here in the group, and all of a sudden now he is representing the mayor. Who does he work for? The charter or the mayor? He's making assumptions for what my petition drive is. That has nothing and no bearing in this, and it never was the cause for which I have that petition drive out there. I'm trying, as this board was just asking questions about a few minutes ago, about trying to find a way to fix the system so that people are actually accountable and the laws and the code actually fit what the citizens actually ask for. I never went to the city council saying my purpose in life has been found by going to the city council and talking. It's allowed me to now express some things when I've been to the city, and I will go to the city, and I'm assuming now, and I can see the disdain when I'm with some of the council members and the city attorney when I do appear before the council and try and talk to them, like I'm trying to ask you people questions today and trying to get answers. And we don't have a vehicle anymore in this city for being able to address the city council as it was done under Mayor Munson's days and earlier. And so all we're asking is to have some way to be able to redress our grievances with the city, and that's a total different part of what's going on today. I brought 2 issues today on this particular matter. You can vote on them together however you're going to do it. But the city's time was spent writing campaign language in this document. If you want to go into how to write campaign literature, I can show you what's being done on number 30, on number 2. I can go back through each one of these and tell you why these types of words are inflammatory in a political sense. They are not the same words being used here. They're the same words he was using in his campaign speeches and the way he was describing things. We don't have the transcript here, but if you were to take the actual videos of his campaign appearances, the audios of those campaign experiences, and what was happening at the State of the City address, you could overlay them over the top of each other. and that's where we have a problem. There's inflammatory things that have been said. Mr. Pfeifle has brought some topics up that weren't any part of this discussion, all only brought up to inflame. And I have a serious problem when the city attorney is representing the mayor and not representing the charter.
Thank you. Comments by members of the board? Jeff, do you have anything?
I actually do. Thanks, Greg. Again, listen to the testimony of everyone today. I just want to steer the board back to, I think, the standard that we need to apply. And just go back to the section where the ordinance cited itself. It just says that the city can pay or spend money to help promote a candidate. But under the executive orders, which, as David asked us to do, is to incorporate, many of this was found in our last hearing, but the executive order allows clearly city officials to meet as an official city business. I think we established last time that the state of the city address is done at a city council meeting, which is clearly official business. And while I have heard Mr. Dennison now twice and understand that he doesn't agree with anything said, he specifically disagrees with some of the factual basis. I don't, other than that general disagreement, I don't hear anything except that. Certainly politics is going to, as we said, create a polarization. It's just the way it goes. But I don't see any facts in this case yet, anything different in the hearing today that would result in at least a different vote by me. I think the ordinance and the executive order are very clear in the allowance of what the mayor must do. And as we pointed out, there is no specific time frames. So my comment is we follow the ordinances of executive order. I see the facts coming, at least as far as I'm concerned, to the same conclusion.
Did you want to put that in motion form, Jeff?
Well, I certainly can, yes. I mean, to the extent that I don't, incorporating the facts, I move that we I move that and again, sorry for stammering around here, but essentially move that we have a finding that the ordinance cited allows or prohibits the expenditure of funds, but that specifically the executive order allows for candidates to appear at official business, that we have established that the state of the city is address is, or the mayor shall provide an annual state of the city address, and that is conducted at official city business. Greg, I'm not sure if that motion is appropriate, but.
Well, Jeff, I think we need to have a motion that deals specifically with the disposition of complaint 14C. So we need to either fight for that complaint or against that complaint, and it would have to be either frivolous or with harassment intent, whatever that motion, or to move forward with it. Carrie, I assume you're recording the comments, and they would become a part of the narrative, but I think we would need a motion specifically to deal with complaint 14C.
Order, just as a question. Actually, I believe it was Mr. Danielson suggested that we might want to deal with B and C together. It seems to me that the facts aren't going to change. Is it in order to move that we deal with B and C in one room?
Jeff, I'm going to ask you as our legal counsel, member of the bar, if you can tell us whether or not we are a better legal ground to deal with these separately, or whether or not we should combine them. I don't know if one is more work or less work, or what we should do? Do you have advice?
You know, I don't know that there's a specific distinction. I think that certainly as a board, we vote to combine those if we felt that they were necessarily linked. It may make more sense, Greg, for us to deal with them separately, to resolve them individually. But I do think there's certainly latitude. It might make for a cleaner record if we were to resolve them separately.
That seems to make sense. So I'll accept the motion dealing with 14C.
Would you do it? I thought this was being.
I'm sorry, it's 14B and it's
Well, I move that we find that the complaint has no basis in fact in terms of ethical issues, and that we dismiss 14B as frivolous and with bias.
the motion. Is there a second? Any comments? All those in favor signify aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. We'll move on to complaint 14C. And Mr. Danielson, I would ask you if you have new information, things that we have not already talked about that are specific to this. We've spent 100 minutes now dealing with this, and we don't want to spend a lot more time.
No, that's fine. That's why I made the suggestion that.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, just a quick question for you. Could you do the motion to allow for Dave to draft a report, just like we did with the previous? Thank you. And this one will be for Greg's signature this time.
We have a motion, we need a second.
Second.
And we have a motion and a second. All those signify saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passed. Thank you.
I appreciate it being done right. No, that's fine. That's why I didn't think there was need for new testimony on this part of it at this point. If Mr. Pfeifle doesn't have anything more to add.
David, anything
Oh,
more to add?
I'm sorry, I forgot. Mr. Erisman wanted to add some comment.
Okay, if this is new information.
It is,
we'll hear
it's
it.
new.
And we'll give you 4 minutes.
Scott Harrison, Sioux Falls. First, I just want to say that, because it has to do a lot with what I'm going to present here. I've been in the graphic design business for over 20 years. I've designed political mailings, direct mailings, anything you can think of. The purpose of direct mail, of course, is to sell a product. So I know a lot about the language. And the funny part about it is, all of my experiences I've had with clients over the past 20 years, whether they were really good experiences or really bad experiences, I have never forgotten. Anyway, besides the content of this, and I could go on for hours about how these two PowerPoints are completely different. The content isn't really the issue here. The issue is the timing. It was shown the last time we were here, and it was shown today, that this meeting was purposely moved. You're right, you're 100% right, Jeff said it, that the mayor must conduct his State of the City address. He must do that, he has to do that. He has to do it at a city council meeting. That's right. It's the timing of the meeting. It was purposely moved before the election so we could use it as a campaign. There was props brought into the meeting.
I just have a question
Yeah.
at that point. You said it was purposely moved.
It had never been done that way before. In the 3 years that Huether did his State of the City addresses, it was always after April 9th. And so all of a sudden, the year that he's up for reelection,
But
he
I
moved.
understand that, but do you have evidence? Do you know his schedule? Do you know all the other ramifications that go with putting together this address? I mean, how do you're making a statement
Yeah,
that I just failed to comprehend. I've been on this.
well,
board-
it would be nice if the mayor was here to answer those questions.
Well, I think that's been answered. Well,
Anyway, I'm just saying it has to do with the timing. I have no idea why all of a sudden, you know, I don't know why he decided to do it, but it's pretty obvious that it was moved. It was moved for some reason. And I'm just saying, moving the meeting, I mean, beat your head against the wall. I mean, it's pretty obvious why it was moved.
So we have discussed the timing
Yeah, yeah,
before. Do you
yeah.
have other items that are new?
That's all I have with that, and I also would like to say that, as someone who believes very, very strongly in my First Amendment rights, to be accused of harassment or of someone harassing when we're giving grievances to elected officials, that's a constitutional right. That's not harassment.
Comments or motions by the board? Oh, I'm sorry.
I would like to potentially address a little bit of the timing issue as well. Not to take away from the work that the mayor obviously puts into this speech, but I started working for the city of Sioux Falls on February 25th, 2013. So I had worked for the city about 8 weeks, I think, before the mayor gave his 2013 City of the City address. And there was an ice storm in there, so it took a little longer to put that presentation together last year. This year, me included, have all done this one time before, and it was just easier to get it done earlier. Mayor Munson did always provide his the last week in March, and again, not to take away from the work the mayor puts into it or the finance department puts into it, but my new position with the city of Sioux Falls makes things like this easier and faster, especially the second year around. So I just want to clarify that.
Thank you. Comments or thoughts from board members?
I'd like to say something. I'm Rebecca Dunn, and I've just been listening to this very impartially, and the thing that bothers me about this whole thing is that an individual can't come in good faith before the ethics board and state their case without being suggested of harassment and frivolousness. That really bothers me. Whether it's Mr. Danielson or any other citizen in this town, whatever they're coming in front of you for, you have the city attorney get up and suggest that to you, and you all pounce on it and add that to this dismissal. I suggest that you review your dismissal. And if you want to dismiss it, fine. But it should not be dismissed with harassment or frivolousness. Thank you very much.
Any other comments from the public? Board members? Questions? We need a motion to deal with item 14C.
Greg, this is Jim. I would move that item 14C be dismissed. I dismissed, there's no factual basis to support the allegations. I believe in the previous one, we've also dismissed as a frivolous claim.
Jeff, I'll have Carrie read back the motion on 14B so that you can hear what that motion was. And you can,
What I had is that Carol moved that the board find complaint 14B had no basis in fact in terms of ethical issues, and that it be dismissed as frivolous and with bias.
thank you. So Jeff, do you want to state your motion?
Yeah, I dismissed the last couple of words, frivolous and what?
And with bias.
with bias.
Okay, all right. I move that complaint 14C is without factual basis. There is no ethical violation. I also find that I want to add to this one that the actions are within the ordinance and the executive order, that can be dismissed as frivolous and compliance.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify saying aye. Opposed? Motion's carried. We have a motion to ask Dave Pfeifle's office to prepare that report for missing.
So,
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion's carried as presented. There any other business that we need to take care of? If not, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment. Motion to the second for adjournment. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you very much.
Yep.